we'll get going. Just to let you know, first of all, that the session is being recorded. We're going to record it up until we get to the question and answer bit. So yeah, just so that you know that. And so I'm very happy to introduce Louise Reardon, who some of you will know already, I think. As she's been in our community for a while. And she is now the Thematic Research Lead in Parliament. She'll tell you more what that means when she gets to speak. And we've just been having a chat about impact and engagement, as you would expect me to be having chats about that with various people. And she offered us one thing that we could do to run a sort of training / conversation session for the consortium. And so this is just a drop in for us to do that. And then the recording will be, I think, put on our YouTube channel or something like that. I'm not exactly sure, somewhere that people can access it afterwards. The session at the moment is an hour and a half. We're not certain that it'll last that long. It's probably going to be about half an hour of slides, then a chance to answer the questions. And then if people want to stay and talk in more detail with Louise, she is available for an hour and a half. So we'll see how it goes. But, you know, if you need to drop out early, that's also fine. And I think with that, I will just hand over to Louise. And thank you very much, Louise, for agreeing to do this for us today.
No problem. Thanks, Sarah. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you all for joining me on Blue Monday. I realise it's Blue Monday and lunchtime, so this is a difficult slot to be in, but hopefully we will have an interesting conversation. Sarah, can you see the slides okay?
I can see them perfectly.
My eyes and ears. Great. Thank you. Yeah. So as Sarah says, I'm currently a thematic research lead for transport in UK Parliament. I'm also Professor of Governance and Public Policy at the University of Birmingham. So why won't my slides move? There we go. So I'm going to cover today is just an introduction to the thematic research lead roles. These roles might be of interest to some of you, hopefully if these get extended. An introduction to UK Parliament, who uses research in UK Parliament and how to engage with UK Parliament, and Q&A. So as Sarah says, I'm going to talk for sort of half an hour-ish. If you've got any questions, either pop them in the chat and we'll look at those after, or we can, you know, you might want to ask me a question in person, that would be great. And yeah, plenty of time to get into any specific questions you have, or if you want a sort of informal discussion with me after, very happy to do that as well. So first off, a little bit about my role. So thematic research leads, I'm one of 8 people who are working as thematic research leads across different policy areas in Parliament. So these are pitched at mid-career researchers funded by UK Research and Innovation, the EDRC to be specific, and we're seconded 3 days a week alongside our academic roles to facilitate and enhance the use of research evidence and expertise in both houses of Parliament. So as I'm sure we're all aware, there is an evidence policy gap, and these thematic research roles are trying to help bridge that gap. So we work with the research community doing events such as this and other things, and embedded within parliamentary teams. So what that means in practice is we do capacity building, we host engagement events, we raise the profile of different research teams and projects within Parliament. We also are embedded within parliamentary teams advising on the day-to-day work of Parliament. So for example, I will sit with the Transport Committee and teams in the House of Commons Library to provide advice, signpost to experts, provide that sort of researcher perspective on topics of the day. So I'm in post until this September. It's been a 2-year role, and the EDRC are currently deciding whether they are going to have a new cohort. We're very hopeful that they are. I've loved the role, happy to discuss more about my experience in the role if that would be of interest. But if and when hopefully these roles come forward again, very happy to talk to anyone who's interested in those. So the current thematic research areas and leads are listed here. We've got an artificial intelligence and digital lead, Verona, who's at Loughborough University, an arts and humanities lead, Helen, who's at Nottingham, business economics and trade, that's Jane at the University of Southampton, a climate and environment lead, Andy, who's at Queen Mary, crime and justice lead, Ruth Lamont at the University of Manchester, a health lead, David at the University of Exeter, and Leslie Ann, who's international affairs and national security, and myself. So you'll see there's no energy area here. That might change, who knows? But we worked very closely together as a thematic research lead network to make sure we have that cross-cutting sort of perspective, and we can feed in and support different policy areas as we go. So what is UK Parliament? Well, on a very basic level, it consists of the House of Commons, which is made up of members of Parliament elected from different constituencies. The House of Lords, which is less so now, but made up of hereditary peers and experts and other political appointees, and a monarch who has our sort of constitutionally leads, if not in practice, Parliament. And I think it's important to have this slide on what UK Parliament does, because often it's treated as a synonym for government, and that's not the case. So what Parliament does fundamentally is obviously represents the people, brings their issues and has a voice for them in Parliament. It makes and changes laws, so primarily it has this legislative function. It checks and challenges the work of government, so it has that important scrutiny function. It debates the important issues of the day and raises their profile, and checks and approves government spending, taxes, budgets and the like. So UK Parliament is all MPs and Lords. The UK government is some MPs and peers led by the Prime Minister. So obviously within our system, with a majority government, which is the way our system is designed, often what the government wants to do has a big influence over the activity of Parliament. But even like now with a large majority Labour government, Parliament is playing a really important function in scrutinising policy, affecting change in legislation as it goes through Parliament. We've seen that with influencing things like the Hillsborough Bill that's going through at the moment, and enables the government to raise and spend money, whereas government is making policy and delivering public services, is accountable to Parliament. So I think it's just important to bear that in mind where we're wanting to have our impact and engagement. Is it with UK Parliament in trying to maybe influence an agenda or shape or scrutinise decisions that have already been made? Or is it with government who is making policy, or there are implications of a policy we want to sort of raise the profile of? So it's important to bear in mind that while there are overlaps between these two institutions, they are very different and have different responsibilities. So who uses research then in UK Parliament? Well, there's kind of three key areas for me. The first are across both houses, across the House of Commons and the House of Lords, the select committee teams. So these scrutinise policy and some legislation, although there are different committees that are set up to look at legislation and bills in particular. So in the House of Commons, for example, you have the Transport Committee, Energy Security and Net Zero Committee. In the House of Lords, we have Home-Based Working Committee, for example. The main difference between the House of Commons and the House of Lords in terms of committees is that House of Commons committees tend to be around a departmental scrutiny. So the select committees tend to be named or have the same portfolios as the government department would have. Whereas in the House of Lords, these tend to be more cross-cutting committees. So for example, a built environment committee, which looks across different departmental areas and looks a bit more broad brush across a policy profile. And in the House of Lords, more often than not, select committees will be set up, or committees will be set up for a short period around a particular issue, whereas in the House of Commons, the committees is a more permanent structure. There's the House of Commons and the House of Lords, both of which have libraries. These provide briefs and guidance to members around upcoming legislation, upcoming policy reforms, and frequently asked questions that they have that constituents would ask members of Parliament. House of Commons Library and the Lords Library provide advice and guidance on quite micro level, as well as quite large areas of policy interest. There's also the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology, which provides a more academically informed overview of different policy areas that tend to be a bit more into the longer term. So select committees regularly use research, the library teams regularly use research, but also individual MPs and their researchers. So MPs will use research to prepare for debates, to help advise their constituents, to provide advocacy around particular issues, and to raise the profile of issues, including through all-party parliamentary groups, which I'll move to in a moment. So as you can already start to tell, there are a range of different teams in a very complex institutional structure that is Parliament, which is good because it means there are lots of entry points in, but also means it's quite inevitably quite difficult to understand day to day what's going on in Parliament and how you might be able to influence. Hopefully, this presentation will help a little bit with that. So first then, select committees, which are probably the most high profile of kind of policy related scrutiny within both houses of Parliament. So select committees are made up of members of Parliament, normally 12 to 14 members of Parliament across parties, primarily drawn from the largest parties of the day. They will have a chair that is a member of Parliament if it's a House of Commons committee. But it's important to remember that they also have a dedicated secretariat of clerks and policy specialists who do the hard graft of supporting the committees every day. So when we're thinking about engagement and policy, it's also important to remember that there are these teams that sit behind the members of Parliament and the other members of Lords committees, the peers there, supporting what they do and who will be engaging with our research and with experts. So these select committees conduct inquiries on a range of matters. These are planned, so it might be there are particular interests of the committee and they want to scrutinise particular things, or there's new legislation coming that they think it's or a policy change happening that they think it's important to scrutinise, and they might know that these things are coming up and so want to look at those. So for example, the Transport Committee, who I work with most closely, they're doing some work on, they've got an inquiry at the moment on electric vehicles and the delivery and rollout of electric vehicles. There's also an inquiry on integrated transport at the moment. These are things that have big policy change happening within the Department of Transport, and so they're wanting to scrutinise those. But also they do responsive things as well. So, for example, with things like Heathrow, the sort of changes there and the announcements around that, they will have one-off sessions and other things that are a bit more responsive to unforeseeable or high-profile events that they think warrant scrutiny. So they invite evidence during inquiries, both written, submitted online and orally through evidence sessions. But also they have private committee meetings where they try and learn more about a topic, for example, or want to discuss something a bit more informally without the sort of, the kind of format of a committee, which has various aspects to it. They can employ subject specialists as specialist advisors. These usually are academics or expert practitioners. So if there's a particularly niche area of policy that the committee support teams feel like they don't have much expertise on, they can get a specialist advisor in to sort of shadow and work with them on a particular inquiry. Many committees go on visits to learn more about a topic. So, you know, including universities, the Science and Technology Committee, you wouldn't be surprised to hear, does a lot of visits to universities to understand research and innovation, but also, you know, across lots of different policy areas. Committees are regularly going on visits to learn more and inform their inquiry work. Committees can also commission research from external sources if they want to, although that's quite rare in my experience. But Secretariat will hold meetings with stakeholders and experts on an ongoing basis. So alongside the formal work of an inquiry being announced and evidence being collected for that, in the background, there is constant work going on to understand the policy environment, understand the emerging issues that might be becoming, what the sector is deeming to be important, all going on in the background constantly with the secretariat of these committees. So in terms of the select committee inquiries, which is the sort of meat, if you like, of what the select committees do, research does and can play a role in all aspects of this. So, for example, the electric vehicles inquiry that the Transport Committee are doing at the moment, they scope the committee, the members of the committee decide that they want to do an inquiry on this area, and then the team works with the committee to scope terms of reference, so the questions that they're particularly going to be interested in answering through their inquiry. To scope that terms of reference, they'll rely on the Parliamentary research ecosystem, so the House of Commons Library, the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology, but they will also be looking at the research published online. They'll speak to stakeholders. Some committees have areas of research interest that are published that people will send things into. So they're constantly looking to understand what the current evidence base is to feed in and shape their terms of reference for an inquiry. Once that terms of reference is launched, they will then invite written evidence from stakeholders, anyone from a lay member of the public to a PhD student, to a professor, to EV driver will be invited to and very welcome to submit written evidence to that inquiry, and that all that evidence will be read, will be absorbed, and is published on the website alongside the inquiry information. And then from the pool of evidence that they've received, from knowledge of the sector, the committee will invite certain people to come and give oral evidence to the inquiry. And alongside that oral evidence, as I said before, committees might go on in visits or whatever to understand more what that looks like in practice. And then the committee will publish a report with recommendations to the government, and the government has 2 months to respond to the committee. So these inquiries can be one-off sessions, or they can be over many months. So the integrated transport inquiry that the Transport Committee are doing, for example, that launched in the summer, and it's got its first evidence session in a couple of weeks. So that's quite more of a long running inquiry. So how you might be able to get involved with the select committees, I would suggest following the committees on X or Blue Sky. There is a knowledge exchange unit mailing list. Just say we'll share these slides after, so you'll get all the hyperlinks to these as well. I would advise signing up to the knowledge exchange unit mailing list, because on there you'll get, especially if you're doing research that is very cross-cutting across different government departments, it gives you a really nice roundup of all the different inquiries that are happening week by week. And so it's a really easy sort of cheat sheet for you to understand what's going on at any given time. bookmark the relevant committee websites, submit written evidence to relevant inquiries. They really do want to hear from academics about how your research informs their questions. So it's a really good opportunity to get involved. Watch out for opportunities to become a specialist advisor. There's just been one, for example, around health. So they are, you know, across different teams, they do advertise these calls. And also what I would say is like email them. So all these committees have a sort of generic email address for the committee. And maybe unlike some university addresses, email addresses that are generic, these actually are read. Every email that comes in is read. There is a process by which they log what emails they've received and the correspondence they've had. So get in touch, share your latest research summaries, reach out and say who you are, say how your research might link to the remit of the committee. Let them know about events, offered to host a private briefing on a topic, for example, or maybe even a visit. As colleagues regularly say to me in Parliament, they don't know what they don't know. You know, they reach out, and if there's an event you think might be of interest, why not reach out to them and tell them about it. So there's the committees. There's also, as I said, the work of the Commons and Lord Libraries. So these produce impartial information and briefing services, as I said, across a range of different aspects of parliamentary activity, a wide range of material that is available on their websites. And these are really good cheat sheets for us as academics as well to understand what the policy debate and summary activity or the nuts and bolts of a policy area and who's responsible for what. The library, House of Commons in particular, library has really comprehensive information through their briefing notes that I found in particular very, very useful to use. Alongside the published material that they will draw on academic research for, they also use research to respond to questions from members of Parliament and peers. So they can be asked a raft of different questions. And so, yeah, they will look for research to help them provide a rigorous answer to a member's inquiry. They again will talk to a range of stakeholders to develop their briefs with a focus on facts and overviews of the policy debate. So the libraries are very much focused on facts of sort of what is, what the current debate is now, because it's all about getting the members of Parliament up to speed on an issue very quickly. And so they want to provide that overview and an impartial overview of what the lay of the land is essentially. Their briefs get less into debates about what ought to be, what should be, and are less long-term in terms of the sort of time horizons that they're looking over. The libraries, if you want to get involved with them, again, there's the Knowledge Exchange Unit, which is a hub which the Thematic Research Leads work with that helps provide, again, that bridging role between the parliamentary teams and researchers. And I would reach out to the Knowledge Exchange Unit with a bit of a blurb, like a bio of who you are, or you could contact a thematic research lead who you think relates to your research area. So we've got the committees, we've got the library teams, and then we've got the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology. This might be the team that you're maybe most familiar with as academics, or at least this is the team that I knew more about before I joined Parliament, because their explicit role is to act as a bridge between the research and policy worlds to ensure that the best available research is feeding into Parliament. So despite their in some ways unhelpful name, social science and the arts and humanities are very much included in what they're interested in and the topics that they cover within their work as well. So POST provide horizon scanning briefs, for example. So at the start of the parliamentary session, they will engage with academics to understand what might be on the horizon in a particular policy area that might become of interest or importance to parliamentarians for the next year, 5 years, 10 years. They provide academically informed overviews of topics. These tend to be along a much longer time horizon and can be quite niche actually in their focus. So academics tend to engage in these briefs very explicitly. So often they will have academic fellows who come and write briefs for them and work with the post teams to do like discrete pieces of research that inform these policy briefs. And post is, their work is guided by a board that is made up of peers and members of parliament from across parties who shape the direction of the topics that they want post to cover and what they want post to write briefs about. So they will also provide alerts about topics they're interested in. So I again would advise you sign up to post alerts where, for example, if they've decided to write a policy briefing on electric vehicles, they will then send out an alert saying, we're looking for expertise on this. Please tell us who you are and what your area of expertise is in relation to this. And they will probably want to ring you up and talk to you about your area to inform their work. So that might be a nice way for you to try and get your research cited in those briefs and build those connections with parliamentary teams. So again, you can follow them on X and LinkedIn and everything, but they are also the unit that has most fellowships, especially academic fellowships, attached to them. So the UKRI policy internships, they're part of that scheme for PhD students to go and work with them. Those opportunities tend to open in the June of every year. But again, if you sign up to things like the Knowledge Exchange Unit newsletter, those opportunities will come around into your inbox. And then there's the members of parliament themselves. And I think we often tend to focus on them when we're thinking about how we want to engage and who we want to influence. But as we've seen, there is a wide variety of like policy officer, civil service engagement that we can all also be doing. But in terms of our members and how they can represent our research in parliament, they can ask written and oral questions in relation to topics of interest or relation to your research in oral, and they do that to the Secretary of State for the department. I've put here a link to the website where MPs, where there's a database basically of all the questions that members have asked in relation to different policy areas. So it's like a search engine. So if you put in, I don't know, energy saving or what have you, it will pull up all the questions that have been asked to the department on that topic and who's asked them. And that's a really good way of you getting to know what members of parliament are interested in a topic that relates to your research. They can also ask oral questions in the respective chambers of government and often cite research evidence in sort of making their case for asking their question of government. And there are various committees that they're all also involved in that they can raise the profile of research or topics related to research in through, for example, the Backbench Business Committee, private members' bills, early day motions. There's also the all-party parliamentary groups, which again have quite a lot of profile in some senses, but actually have limited formal powers. should I say. So all party parliamentary groups are informal groups of MPs and peers that focus on subjects or countries. You know, there is an extensive list of all party parliamentary groups. There are hundreds of different areas covered. So for example, there's an APPG on energy studies, there's another one on micromobility. Anything you can think of, there's probably an all party parliamentary group related to it. Some groups are more active than others, but these are basically allow members to develop their knowledge on a particular area, meet other people, including parliamentarians who are interested in a topic, and raise awareness of a topic and raise its profile. They often meet regularly, they hold events, they produce reports, and they run inquiries. So there's a full register of the groups on the Parliament website. And what I would say is that these are really good ways of, you know, they're very open groups often, so they will have external speakers, including academics. They will have debates within. They're a good convening space where you get policymakers and stakeholders in the same room with parliamentarians. And so they're a good way of seeing again who's interested, and it might be that you'd want to go to an event and sort of get to know who else is working in that sector. But again, they use research to help raise the profile of the work they're interested in, or because they're just really interested in a topic and want to hear from academic experts who know a lot about this area. So do have a look there and have a look at who the secretariats are for those groups. They will often be secretariats from, say, a charity or an advocacy group, and not necessarily the member of parliament who leads the group. But if you make contact with them, you'll be able to know when their events are, and they tend to be quite open groups to go to events with. So I've said about the vast array of different teams that work in Parliament that engage with research, and I guess those of you who are on the call hopefully don't need convincing of why it might be useful to engage. But to reiterate from my experience, I think engaging with Parliament is really important to helping inform democratic debate and scrutiny of government, isn't it? Especially in this, what can be quite a polarized and challenging environment. You know, has never been a more important time for rigorous academic evidence to inform debate and sort of underpin that democratic debate. It helps to shape, change and influence the policy agenda. So again, Parliament isn't making policy, but it's a very loud, influential place where policy agendas can be influenced and legislation influenced and improved and thought about. So again, really important for that sort of agenda setting and scrutiny piece. It allows, on a more of a personal level as a researcher, it allows you to get a new perspective on your work, I think, and grow your professional network. So understanding what parliamentarians think about a policy might help you to think about new research questions or different ways you might frame your research and the value of your research. Helps you raise the profile of your research and broaden its dissemination, and that can be really important for things like promotion. Helps you build your external credibility and can help you contribute or lead change in an area that you feel passionate about, and also learn new skills and insights into how decisions are made. And again, we can talk about this in the Q&A a bit more, can help demonstrate impact. I think it's very difficult to demonstrate the impact from a ref point of view, but it's a starting point to help you with that. And again, we can unpack that a little bit if that is of interest. So sorry, this slide has got quite a lot of information on it and it's quite small text, but some tips for how to engage with Parliament, which I guess maybe are applicable to all sort of policy areas. I'd be interested to get your take on this. But for me, the first thing is to really grow understanding of the work that Parliament does. So that slide that I had on Parliament being different to government, it's amazing how many people conflate, in my experience, talking about this role, conflate government and Parliament. And so it's about understanding, what Parliament does and what people are interested in that institutional context. So if you can try and keep up to date with policy news, government announcements, that's really helpful because it helps to understand where member interests and priorities might be, where committees might be looking over the horizon and thinking, oh yeah, we probably need to do some work on that. So it helps to sort of set the scene, if you like, for the work Parliament are doing. I would also try and attend policy orientated events. I appreciate we're in a very difficult financial climate in the university sector. There isn't a lot of money swilling around to go, or time to go to policy events, but where there can be enabled through budgets for engagement, hopefully through centres like yours, I really would encourage it. So groups like the Institute for Government, Westminster Policy Forum, that's where a lot of policy specialists, policymakers, parliamentary teams go to get the latest updates on key debates. So they're a good place for you to learn that language of the policy world, but also to understand who's influencing the influencers, if that makes sense. The all-party parliamentary events, for example, also another way to make connections. And engage with the parliamentary material, read some of the briefings from the House of Commons Library or Post to get a better understanding of its approach and communication. Secondly, have an active online profile. So again, basic, making sure that your university profile is up to date, but also being on other pages too. So to be very blunt about it, when people are thinking about a topic, they're thinking, right, how do I do this terms of reference? I need to write a briefing on this. The first place they go is Google search, not Google Scholar, Google search, and just, type in whatever keyword terms or, experts in X thing. And so the more you can have a presence online in multiple different places, all to the better. So yeah, at the very least, making sure your university profile is up to date. I would advise trying, if possible, I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but to blog about your research or to write pieces, even if it's a long, for example, LinkedIn post. Try and use third-party spaces that have a policy following, like LinkedIn, to help raise the profile of you and your research and the evidence you're wanting to share. And if you feel comfortable, provide commentary on ongoing policy debates, because again, these help position you as an expert in a policy area, not just in a sort of a specific area of interest. And if possible, on your profiles, link to a video of you speaking or to a seminar you've held or something like that. Because again, when people are reaching out, wanting to invite experts in to maybe speak at an event or to provide oral evidence at a committee, they want to be confident that someone's going to be able to communicate effectively. And yeah, is up to that task, if you like, of being able to sort of hold a conversation with non-experts, and that person is going to be able to feel comfortable talking around a topic area and not just in relation to their specific project. So grow your understanding, have an active online profile, and thirdly, make connections and build relationships. And this kind of links to growing your understanding, really. So make connections and follow people on social media. Again, there's lots of specialists on LinkedIn. That tends to be the place people are going now rather than X. And they use it regularly, including to find experts or to identify emerging debates. So for example, if there's been a policy announcement or there's been legislation tabled in Parliament, people will be picking up on on commentary on LinkedIn of like, what's the sector saying about this? What are academics saying about this? Places like LinkedIn and other policy fora are places where people will get up to speed on those topics quite quickly. Again, as I've said in the majority of the presentation, get in touch with people, but you know, with the knowledge exchange unit, with us as thematic research leads, with committees, but ideally do that with a purpose. So try and hook your work into something that's happening in the policy space or links to an area of interest, activity, or publication that's been recently produced by them to make your offer and ask clear. So this is a really crowded environment where lots of people are trying to share evidence, trying to say that their thing is really important to be listened to. So if you can provide that hook of why you're reaching out and what you can offer, as well as what you want from them, that's really important. So for example, if a committee is looking at something, you can say, oh, I see you're doing an inquiry on this. You know, we have lots of expertise in this area. We'd be happy to host, you know, have an informal conversation with you about this topic if you think that would be helpful. You know, not just about what they can give you, but really importantly, especially when it's an early contact, what you can offer them. And just a reminder that despite all these different teams that I've just been speaking about, the staff body is relatively small and it's very collaborative. So they share contacts with each other. Often they will be asking each other if they know anyone who would be good to talk at something, or they will say, we've had an email on X topic, we think this is relevant to your committee, and vice versa. So grow your understanding, have an active online profile, make connections and build relationships. Fourthly, make sure your research and communication is accessible. So open access here is useful, but not a deal breaker. So yeah, really important to have things open access, but ever more important, thinking about how you can do that translation of the output, or before you publish something, how you can contextualize that research, again with a view to engaging with Parliament and influencing the agenda, pulling out key points and contextualizing them, making that so what clear, and explaining that relevance to the policy community or the parliamentary team that you think should know about it. Writing for an intelligent and informed non-expert audience. So provide that summary and context for what you're talking about. These teams can get up to speed with a topic incredibly quickly, but they're not going to know the ins and outs of an academic debate that might have been going on for the last 5 years. So provide that orientation in any communications you have, and avoid jargon and acronyms and heavily politicized language. So again, impartiality is really important. Teams are not allowed to have any partiality, any links or affiliations with any sort of political parties or teams. So you have to be very careful that in your communications, you're not overtly politicizing what you're communicating. And be responsive is my final, my fifth point. Respond to calls for evidence, contributions where they're asked for, follow the guidance when you do that, and if possible, work in advance of deadlines. So for example, where an inquiry has a deadline of, say, the 30th of January, they will be working to set up the oral evidence for that inquiry weeks in advance of that deadline. So the earlier you can get in your material to support that inquiry, the more chance they have to consider your evidence and maybe consider you as a witness. So work in advance of deadlines, which I'm terrible at doing, but we can have the desire to do that if possible. And then finally, repeat 1 through 5. So this is not a sort of this engagement with, especially with teams in Parliament, takes a long time to build up, to build that trust, to build that reciprocity. So yeah, just keep going with all of these things as and when your time allows. And again, here is a list of resources and other helpful links that might be useful to you. Again, we'll share these slides around. Thank you. Any questions? I appreciate I've thrown a lot at you there. Any questions, clarifications, or if anyone has any ideas of how someone like myself as a thematic lead within Parliament can support your work, do let me know. I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Thanks, Louise. I have to say, I've listened to people talk about this before, but I feel more informed than ever. So very clear delivery, and yeah, definitely learned some stuff myself. We have a couple of questions.